Welcome everyone. This is Jen with Wild Stitchers. Hope everyone's doing well this morning. Thanks everyone for joining me for this kind of two-part session today. Let me get in front of the camera here so you can all see me. Down just a little bit. So good morning. Hope everyone's doing well. This is kind of a two-parter today. We're going to do an hour of a Turkish spindle spinning demo, and then we're going to kind of go into the what's the tool demonstration to kind of show you the different tools that we have and everything. So again, for those that are just joining, I'm Jen with Wild Stitchers, and I think we're going to have fun the next couple hours. So just to give you a little bit about who Wild Stitchers is, who Wild Stitchers are. We are a family-owned and run business. Myself and my sister-in-law, Norleen, run the business, and my dad is our maker, so he makes everything that you will be seeing over the next 2 hours, except for the wool, of course, because, the sheep do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a relatively in-depth demo of spinning with the Turkish spindle. And we are recording. If you have questions, you can pop them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. Or if you want to stop me and see something again, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. I have no problem with questions as we go and everything. If there's something that you wanted to see that I haven't shown you, again, let me know. And if it's coming up, I'll let you know that. If we've done it, I'll do it again. I have no problem with that. A little bit about our products. All of our 99% of our products are made from wood, and we do not stain any of our wood, so everything you see is going to be the natural beauty of that wood. We love how wood works, looks, works, and everything, so we don't want to cover that up with a stain. So what we do is we may put a finish on it, but that finish is only to protect the wood or to help that natural beauty shine through, or a combo of both. So just something to keep in mind. We don't want to put anything on the woods that are going to mess with your fibers that you're using with them or anything like that. And with that, I'm going to swap my camera around, and actually I take that back. Camera's going to stay where it's at. I'm going to move something here on my display, and then I'll start showing demos. Okay, so just get rid of that bottom bar there so you can see the full screen and not have that in its way. So Turkish spindle. This is a Turkish spindle. And it's comprised of a few different parts. We've got the shaft, and we've got these two things here, which are called glides. These come apart, and so the shaft slides out. I just had to give it a little bit of a twist to loosen its grip. And then one glide slides out of the other. Here's what they look like all separated. The glides and the shaft. When you get them in the mail, if you order from us, they're going to be separated like this for easier shipping, so it doesn't get broken in the mail or anything like that. So you're going to have it separately. So the way you're going to spin with these is you need to put them together. So you got to put your glides together. The thin one slides into the hole of the thick one. Line up the center holes there, and then your shaft will slide through. Now your shaft will only go through one way, like this. That's not the way you want to do it, although there are some Turkish spindles that do spin this way, but that's not the way ours are. So you want to go through the bottom from the top. If you try to go one end or the other, one end isn't going to go through it because this shaft is tapered. So you just want to go through the side that slides down and slide it in until it gets really tight. You don't want your pieces moving around or anything like that, so you're just going to snug out there. For the glides looking like this, they actually have a purpose other than to weight your spindle and to help it spin. This is where you wind your cap onto, and your cap is the yarn that you spin. So other drop spindles, you either go above the whirl or below the whirl, depending on what type of drop spindle it is. This is a type of drop spindle, but you wind it onto the glides, and when you do that, that makes a beautiful center pole ball. Mine's kind of coming apart because it's tiny, but it makes a center pole ball that you can pull from the center, or you can pull from the outside. And when you're done, if you're spinning your singles, then you have a center pole ball that you can ply from the inside and the outside at the same time, and do a 2-ply that way. If you're done plying, like the stuff that you had I had just shown, that stuff is ready to use. So you don't have to wind it into a cake or anything like that. You can use it directly from that. Sometimes when you talk about Turkish spindles, you hear people say turtles, and that's what that center pole ball is kind of nicknamed. Is it kind of looks like a turtle shell, so it's sometimes called a turtle. So that's a little bit on the Turkish spindles. To get started, there's several ways you can get started on a Turkish spindle. One way is just take your fiber, roll a little bit between your hands, and tie it onto the top and start spinning from there. This can be sometimes can be cumbersome, because once you get started and you have a length of yarn that you want to wind onto your cop, then you need to move it from here down to the bottom notch, and that can be cumbersome at times. So what I like to do is I actually like to start out with a leader. And what a leader is it's just a loop of yarn that you have, and mine's a little kinky because it's been kinky and curly because it's been on a spindle before. So it's just like this. It's just a length of yarn that you've tied a knot into, and you've made it into a loop. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your Turkish spindle, you're going to turn upside down. There's going to be a notch down here. There's a slight notch or indentation down here that you're going to tie that onto. And the easiest way to tie a leader onto a spindle is you just make a circle and tighten it down. And if this was a normal drop spindle, I might do a second one on that just to keep it steady, but that's really all you need on a Turkish. This is a little bit longer than quite a bit longer than my spindle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do one wrap around this just to make that leader a little bit shorter. And the way you wrap this is you go over the top of 2 of your glides, and you go over the top of 2 of your glides and under 1. And that's going to make that a little bit smaller. I want it a little bit more. So I'm going to go over 2 and under 1. And now that's more the length of the leader I want. Before you start spinning with this, you're going to want to get your leader on so it doesn't slide off of the top of your shaft. And the easiest way to do that is with a half hitch. And a half hitch is you just take it and you wrap the yarn around your thumb like this. This is what it looks like on the other side. And like this. And I just take the point of that spindle and go underneath and grab that. And now it's just got a little tiny hitch to that yarn, and you can tell it's not going anywhere. So this is how your spindle is going to look to start out with a leader. Is we've got the leader tied down at the bottom. Because it was long enough, we've got it wrapped around, and we've got it half hitched up to the top of the shaft, and we have a little bit extra here that we can use to spin from. The fiber that I'm going to spin today is one of these wonderful rollags that was done on a blending board. This was done using a color inspiration photo and a bunch of colors that was on that. Just chosen, put on the blending board, and take it off in rollags. To spin from this rollag is, I'm going to actually take off my watch so it doesn't snag. Mine doesn't have a lot of loose parts, but any little bit less. I'm going to take this and just barely spread it out a little bit, just to give this rollag just a little bit of length, because what I do is I wrap it around my arm, kind of like almost like a pet snake or something, if you've ever seen how people hold their snakes. And then I'm going to hold out here at one end. This end is where we're going to draft from. You can see how that comes apart nicely. And that's how we're going to spin from this roll lag. If you're spinning from comb top, I've got some here real quick. Hold on. If you're spinning from comb top or a braid of something, then what I tend to do is I tend to take it and I find where it kind of naturally wants to separate, and I separate those pieces, and then I spin from the smaller side. I also tend to pre-draft, and what that means is just kind of draft out your fibers or pull your fibers apart slightly before you get started. So what I would do is I'd go through here and I would start drafting. Now, if you're new to spinning, drafting may be a newer term and wondering what that is. And basically what that is it's just kind of pulling your fibers apart a little bit so you can get the size of yarn that you want. The less yarn that you have that you're going to put twist into it, the thinner the yarn's going to be. The more fiber you have to put the twist into it, the thicker your yarn's going to be. And when you're drafting, sometimes when you're drafting, you're holding this and you're going, this stuff is not pulling apart. I don't know why. It's frustrating. And the reason is your hands are too close together. Each fiber that you use is going to have what's called a staple length. A staple length is the length of fiber. Did someone have a question? Okay. What fiber length is it's the length of fiber that has grown on the sheet before it was shorn. And when it was shorn, then that's a staple length, is that length of fiber. And the way you find out your staple length, and this is important to know so you know how far you can pull these fibers out apart from each other without pulling it apart, how far you can pull the fibers without pulling them apart and having two pieces. So what you do is you grab the very top of your fiber and you give it a pull and you take out that little bit that you're holding on to. And that is roughly what your fiber length is. How well, I chose white. That's kind of a bad color to choose here. But if I stand up here and put this against my shirt, you can kind of see how long that fiber is. So that roughly, you want to have your hands at least that far apart to draft your fiber. So if you're looking at fiber to draft and you're holding your hands this far, that's not far apart. That's not as far apart as those fibers were long. So you want to move your hand, one of your hands back a little bit, and then it easily pulls apart. And as I pre-draft this, I'm only doing it a little bit, so I don't have to draft it as much when I'm spinning. And is there a set amount, if you want to pre-draft, is there a set amount that you pre-draft? No, that's basically what you want. So now you can see that little chunk of fiber I had is now a much longer piece. And now I can take this and drape it over my arm like I'm going to do that roll lag and spin from it. So that's pre-drafting. You can pre-draft on the roll lag as well. It's kind of set in a way that it's only going to grab and pull some at a time. This is a little bit of a textured roll lag, so you're going to see some textures coming through and stuff like that. To start this, I've got my fiber wrapped around my arm like a good little pet snake that I would never in my life have. And I'm separating the loop in my, there we go, kind of. I'm separating the loop in my leader here. And it's being a little finicky because it's had lots of wool spun on it. So there we go. Now my top loop is here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fiber, I'm going to put it through that loop, and I'm going to fold it in half at the top. So you can see that's folded up there. And then what I'm going to do is, because I'm spinning a single, I'm going to spin the spindle. I'm going to flick it in a counterclockwise position, which means that this top glide is going to go, I'm going to spin it in a clockwise position, which means that this glide is going to turn to the right and around the bottom and up just like a clock hand would go. So I'm going to give it a flick, and the way I flick it is I use my thumb and 2 fingers, and I just move that thumb up and give it a quick flick. Couple quick flicks, and I'm building a lot of energy up into here. You can see how as soon as that slows down, it wants to turn backwards. That tells me I have lots of energy up in here. And that energy is good. When you're first starting out, you really want that extra energy into your leader because that's what's going to help you get started out. When I'm first attaching my yarn, I put lots and lots of energy into here, even so much that it curls up on itself. You see how that curls up on itself and it stretches back out? That's how I like to start out. Lots of energy. What I'm going to do with this, especially if you're just starting out, is I'm going to park it. And the way I park it is I put it underneath my armpit. And with the Turkish, it's a little bit more awkward to do the park and draft than it is with the drop spindle, but it's still very doable. You just kind of hold on to it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to draft your fibers out just a little bit. And you're going to pinch up here where you're by the end of your fiber. And you're going to let this hand go, which is what's holding your twist back. And a lot of that twist that was down here is now traveled into that spot. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to switch my fingers. So this is holding the twist back. This one's holding the twist back. I'm going to draft a little bit and I'm going to pinch up here because I don't want the twist going any further than this hand. And then I'm going to let that twist go. And now that just twisted into that fiber. Now it's time to put some more twist in. So I'm going to take the spindle and I'm going to give it that flick again. And I'm going to let that twist build up here. And I just flicked it again. Now I can feel up here in these fingers that there's a lot of twist going up there. Because as you do this, you're going to feel that twist build up underneath your fingers and try to get through. But you're not going to let it through yet. So just giving it a little bit more twist. And now I'm going to park underneath my armpit again. I'm going to give it a draft. I'm going to pinch up here so it doesn't go any further than that. And I'm going to let that go and look at how that yellow piece just spun up. I love watching that fiber twist up like that. It's very fun to me. So now because I'm parking and drafting, this is about as much as my arm length can go from my armpit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind this length up onto our cop, onto the glides, and I'm going to take the half hitch off, which is just sliding my thumb underneath it and pushing it over the top. We can see where the fiber, where we ended with our twisting before is right up between these. So now we're going to go over 2 glides and we're under 1. We're going over 2 and under 1, and feel free to spin your spindle, turn your spindle as you do this. So I just went under 1, so we're going to go over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, and then I'm going to check my length. Yeah, that's about good. So I'm going to half hitch this now. And I'm actually going to twist it around my shaft a couple times. That's not a necessary thing, but it helps if you don't have enough room to go over and under again. And then I'm going to half hitch this. So wrap it around my thumb so there's a cross in the back. Put my shaft underneath it and wrap that loop around the shaft instead of my thumb. And now we're ready to go again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do just a little bit more here. So we're going to flick this. We're going to change our hands, pinch it, draft, and let it go. So we're going to give this a spin again. When you get lots of spin in your Turkish spindle, you'll notice it'll start to wobble, and that's okay. That just means I've got lots of twist up here in this yarn, and it just kind of wobbles it out a little bit. So we're going to do that again. We're going to park this. We're going to change our pinch. We're going to draft out a little bit. I'm going to pinch up here so I can stop the twist going up any further. Then I'm going to let that go, put a little bit of tension to it, and you can see how that piece looks. One more time, put some twist into it, flicking it clockwise, parking it, drafting out, pinching so it doesn't go up into the fiber, and there you go. If you notice that it looks really kind of not very twisted, that's because I don't have the weight onto it, and once I get the weight onto it, it shows the actual twist that's in it. And now again, because I'm at arm's length, let's wind this onto the cop. I'm going to take that half hitch off, slide my thumb underneath it, pull it off, find your end point, which is usually an under 1. So now we're going to go over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. Trying to do this without my arm in the way. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, and oh, I went too far, so I'm going to go back to the last under 1 that I went. You always want a certain length of fiber. You know, however much works for you, you want to leave that above your spindle. I'm going to half hitch this again, loop around my thumb, cross in the back, that shaft underneath that loop, and then pull your thumb out so the loop now tightens on the shaft versus your thumb. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a twist, just to get it a little bit of extra twist in there. When you're winding onto your cap, the top looks like this if you're going over 2, under 1, and your bottom looks like this. If your top looks like this, that means you're going under 2, over 1, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It still will be making a center pull ball. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just going to look different than other people's. So the way to do it to get those crisscrosses on top is the over 2, under 1. And I can tell you that I'm sitting here and saying this to you guys, so you know what I'm doing, and so it gets ingrained into your head. But as I spin on a Turkish spindle and I wind up, to this day, I still sit here and say over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. So it's definitely nothing, nothing to be shy about if you're doing it. It helps you out. So I'm putting a lot of twist in here. I'm going to park it again, change my hands around, draft out, and let that twist go. And you can see I got a thick spot here, a nice thick spot here, and a really thin spot here because of how I drafted that, and that is okay. Drafting. And now you can see I didn't park that. I just let that spin. I just let it spin as I'm switching my fingers and drafting out and then pinching here and letting the twist go in. And that's kind of the next progression. Once you get comfortable with drafting from whatever type of fiber you're using, then you can start, putting spin into your spindle and try drafting while it's spinning. Do you have to make that progression? Absolutely not. It's just a progression that you can make. Once you get good at drafting while it spins, sometimes I'll stand up and spin because that way I have more length of yarn that I can spin before I have to wind it on. I also like to walk and spin my spindle because that's something that I get bored really easily. It's something to keep me moving and also keep my hands going. So I'm just doing a little bit of this, just spinning that spindle in a clockwise way, swapping how my hands are pinching the fiber, pinch up here before I let it go, and then let go with the other one. Let the twist go back up into the yarn, but not into the fiber. Just this hand manages where the twist goes, and the other hand manages when the twist goes. So that's why you see me holding up here and giving a flip, because I always flick with my right hand. You'll see me give a flick, and then you'll see me transfer hands over and change my pinching and everything like that. It's all a matter of practice to get to, how you're using your hands. Now, I've got quite a bit of yarn here. And it's more that I want to just let hang before I wind onto my cop. So what I'm going to do is kind of a butterfly method, is I'm going to hold the fiber here with my thumb, and then I'm going to take my finger down and wrap around my pinky, and then I'm going to make a figure 8 on my palm, going around my thumb and around my pinky and walking that in until I can get to that spindle. And then that way I don't have a bunch of yarn kind of hanging, trying to twist upon itself or anything like that. And now every time I want to wind, I can just unwind a little bit from my fingers and start doing this again. So now we're going to go over 2. Let's see if I can do this better standing up so you can see it. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under the 1, over 2, under 1. Now I need a little more go from my hand. I'm going to let a little bit more go, and we'll continue. Over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. Let more fiber go. Over 2, under 1, and now let's try another over 2, under 1. Yeah, that's about right. So you can see how much I have there. It's probably 4 inches or so that I tend to leave. Do that half hitch. So there's my cross on that side of the thumb, the loop there. This is where I'm going to put the fiber, the shaft under, and release that loop so it comes on to that. If you're at a point where you want to stop, hey, you need to answer the door or let the dog out or do something with the kids or something like this, a good way to stop, you got your half hitch here, so none of this stuff's gonna unwind. So what I always do is I put a little bit of extra twist in this yarn here, and then I take it and I fold it over and I let it twist up on itself like that. And now what that does is when you set this down, none of that unwinds. That all sits nice. And also, kind of gives you an idea. That's what a 2-ply of this yarn is going to look like. How cool is that? So this is the basics of, Turkish spindling. So let's say you've ended your roll egg, you have no more fiber, or it drops off, because that happens, and you have this fluffiness on the end of what you just spun, and now you're sitting here going, well, what the heck do I do now? And you got to get these 2 pieces joined back together so you can continue spinning your yarn. And the way that you do that is this side here, you want to fluff that up a little bit, because that's going to be how it's going to grab onto the other one. And then this end of your fiber here, you're going to fluff that up a little bit. Maybe draft a little bit out, give a little bit more fluff. You're going to set these 2 on top of each other and hold them. Okay, so I'm holding those. I'm going to come down here and give my spindle a flick so it spins clockwise again. And you can see with where my hands were, that already caught some of that fiber that I layered on top of each other. I'm going to give it a good flick. I'm going to park it. And then I'm going to move my fingers again, and I'm going to draft out a little bit. And I'm going to pinch up here. And now those 2 pieces are now very securely attached to each other. You can see here that there's a little bit wider spot there. This is where my join is. Sometimes I'm really good and you can't see my joins. Other times you can. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially as a beginner. And, I've been spinning for 5, 6 years now, 5.5 years, somewhere in there. And I still have inconsistently spun yarn. I still have joins that look, you can definitely tell, oh, that's where I joined that yarn. But you know what? This is your yarn. So as long as you're okay with it, then everybody else needs to be okay with it. There's nothing saying that you have to make it so your joins can't be seen or that you have to make consistent yarn. Matter of fact, there's people that make art yarn that is very much on purpose non-consistent. So we're just going to keep going now that we've got this reattached, and we're going to give it a spin. We're going to manage our twist with this hand. We're going to manage our fiber with the other hand, and just keep doing the switching over. And as you get going, you'll be able to do this a little bit faster. Reach down and give it a flick. Continue where you were. If you've ever spun on a drop spindle, a Turkish spindle is no different. The only difference is that your weight is on the bottom of your spindle versus the top. So if you're used to using top whorl drop spindles, then it's basically like turning that top whorl upside down. Is that your weight is on the bottom of your spindle versus the top of your spindle. There's a little bit of difference in feel when you spin. This one took me a little bit to get used to because that weight was on the bottom of the spindle. But now that I've gotten used to it, I absolutely love spinning this way. I'm going to wrap this again now. So we're going over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. And as I do this, I'm going to keep doing that and talk a little bit about beginning spindling. Things I like to tell people, and this is just mainly from my experience, is you need to do what makes you happy with your spinning. So one of the first fibers I spun on a very large drop spindle, and I say very large, it was 3-ounce drop spindle. So it was very large, very heavy in the realm of drop spindles. I learned on a very heavy drop spindle, and one of the first fibers I spun was alpaca. Depending on who you talk to, some people would tell you that that is wrong, that is incorrect, you should never do that. And I am proof that if you want to do it, you can do it. So if you really want to spin that alpaca, and that's the first stuff you want to work with because that's what you have, or say you have Angora or silk or whatever it is, if you have that fiber and you want to spin it and you've never spun before, you can do it. Just know that those fibers have certain properties that make it slicker, and drafting is different than if you're drafting wool. And that's why some people tell you not to start out that way. But you can do it. If you want to start out with wool and you want something that beginners tend to be given to spin, then it's something like a more rustic fiber, a little bit stickier fiber, as they call it. Like a Romney is really good. A Polworth, Shetlands, things like that are really good. You don't have to start out with things like alpaca or Angora or even merino, which is what I'm spinning here. You can start out with many different breeds. There's a lot of different sheep breeds out there. And you can start out with whatever you want to. Don't let somebody tell you you can't. And don't let them tell you you can't and make you decide what they want you to spin. If you want to learn it, you need to do what makes you happy. Because if you're not enjoying the fiber that you're spinning with, then you're not going to enjoy the spinning. Also with the spindles. Turkish spindles, I found this a little bit different to use, but I was very, very used to a different type of spindle. Turkish spindles are great for beginners, a very great weight, and a way to do it, especially because you're winding a center pull ball when you're done. So I suggest, again, if you have a certain type of spindle you want to use to learn, then definitely use it. So I got that all wound up. I've got it hitched back on, and now I'm going to spin some more. Just giving it that counterclockwise, drafting, managing that twist with one hand, making sure it doesn't go too far into the fiber with the other hand as I go. And I'm going to wind this up again with my butterfly. I don't know if I started calling it a butterfly or if it truly is called a butterfly motion, but that's what I call it. So over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. Let some fiber go from my fingers. Under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1. And I think that's going to be fine for our length. So as you're going through this, I'm going to break that rolag off. I want to show you how to get the fiber off the spindle here. So I'm going to do a little bit more twisting here. And then I'm going to wind the rest of this onto the cop. 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, over 2, under 1, and then over 2. So there's the end of it. Now, how to get this off is you take your leader off of the bottom here. And if your leader's a little bit too short, which mine is, just because I wound it tight. Oh, no, there I got it. I'm just sliding it off the top there. You're going to pull your shaft out, give it that little bit of a twist. You're going to pull the skinny glide out, just like that. And then you're going to pull the ball off of your thicker glide. And now you have this cool little center pull ball. And this one is tiny because I didn't do a lot of fiber. Here's my end from the outside, and here's my leader that I'm going to pull from the inside. And there's the beginning of the yarn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to fluff up the fiber here at the end. And then I'm going to kind of pull that apart. And now the leader's off of that. And what I tend to do is just give this a little bit of a twist. Maybe wet your fingers a little bit and rub it onto there. That'll help keep that from flying away a little bit. Now, since you have a center pull ball, although a very tiny one, you can two-ply directly from this. And the way you do it is you take your outside bit and your inside bit and you hold them together and you ply. You can ply on a Turkish spindle just as easy as you could spin on a Turkish spindle. I'm just putting it back together again, center, the small one through the center of the large one, shaft through the middle, put it back together. I'm going to not use my leader this time. And again, I'm just kind of doing almost like a spit join on this, just a little bit on, a little bit of saliva on my fingers, twisting it together. And then I'm going to tie this around the bottom of my shaft. And I'm going to lift this on my leg. And sorry, you guys aren't going to see this because I need to use both hands. So I'm just doing a typical over-under knot there. Putting a little bit of twist in it to get those two to twist together. And then running these fibers up on the shaft, doing a half hitch. And then now, since we're plying this yarn, what we're going to do is we're going to go counterclockwise. So you're going to turn it the opposite direction that you were turning it before. So I was going clockwise. I was going this way, and I don't want to do that because that's how these fibers are spun. When you ply, you always want to go the other direction. So we're going to go this way around. So we're going to take this top glide here, and we're going to move it to the left to spin. So I'm going to give it a flick the same way I would before. I'm going to pull some yarn out of my hand, that center pull ball that's sitting here. Give it another flick. Pull a little bit more out. And you can see, especially right here, how that yarn is now plied together. I stand up so you can, the camera can focus. So you can see how that's plied together there. All the way up. And the different colors are playing nicely together. So, what do you do with it now? Same thing you did with it before, is I do my little butterfly thing. I remove the half hitch. And what I do also is I let some of that twist that's up here down into this little bit because it didn't get any twist. And then we're going to do the same over under. Over 2, under 1, 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 over 2, under 1. You guys are going to be saying over 2, under 1 in your sleep now. After listening to me say it, I have hitched it the same way I had been before. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull out a length of yarn and I'm going to spin it counterclockwise to get the twist to apply it together up here. Pull out some more yarn, let that drop down, and look at this. There's the end. This is what I love about plying with center pull balls, is that you always use every ounce of yarn that you spun. So if you've plied on spindles and you've used 2 different spindles to take your singles from, or plied on the wheel and you have 2 spindles or 2 bobbins that your yarn is on, you know that you run the risk of having one bobbin with more yarn in it than the other, and you have some left over. If you do a 2-ply from a center pull ball, it will always end you in the middle of your yarn, and you will never waste any of it. So if I'm doing a 2-ply, I'm almost always going to do a center pull ball just for that reason, because for me, some people are really good about getting their bobbins even, and that's excellent. You know, I give anybody that can do that, I give them major props for that, because I can't. But for me, when I'm spinning on my wheel, I have one bobbin and I've weighed out the fiber, so I've got 3 ounces on each bobbin, but it doesn't mean that I've spun it consistently. So one may have, you know, say one has 150 yards and the other one has 125 yards on it, because I spun one thicker than the other. If I'm going from the bobbins, then I'm going to have 25 yards left from one, or if I'm doing a 2-ply from bobbins, then I'm going to have 25 yards left from one bobbin. And I'm either going to have to wind that and center pull ball that, and apply it from a center pull ball, or it's going to be left there, you know, or it's going to be as a single, you know, one of the options. So I like doing the center pull ball. And to take this off, you do the same thing as you did before, and you slide that over. You take the knot out, or you slide the knot real far down, and then you take your skinny glide out of your, I take shaft off first. Step ahead of myself, give a light twist, take that out. Small glide comes out, and then the ball comes off the big glide. And now I have this little tiny turtle of a 2-plied yarn. Cool thing that you guys can do with Turkish spindles when you get used to the feel of it and everything is you can actually do a chain ply on a Turkish spindle. It's called ply on the fly. And what a chain ply is basically you're making a larger like crochet chain, and then you're twisting those chains as you go. And with the Turkish spindle, because of how they are made and how they're designed, you have these glides that you can hook your loop onto that you're plying with in a chain ply. And what you do is you spin a length of yarn, you take your loop off of here, you do your chains, you ply that going the opposite direction, you wind it onto your cop. So it's kind of like a multi-step. I've learned how to do it. I'm definitely not good at it, so I'm not going to show it to you guys today. But definitely, if you like the idea and you want to learn how to do that, definitely check it up on YouTube. When I get better with it, I'll definitely bring it back to Camp Yarnsie and show you guys how to ply on the fly on a spindle, whether it be a Turkish spindle or a drop spindle that has the right design elements to it to allow you to do that. Because you can't, it's not easy to do it on just a plain smooth round drop spindle. You need something to be able to hold that loop onto. So it's a cool technique, definitely, if it's something you want to look into. check it out and everything. So for the Turkish spinning demo piece, we got about 15 minutes. I want to open this up to questions. I see I have a few here in chat, so I'm going to slide out of the way here. I'm going to bring up the chat. Thank you, Kathy. I've been practicing for quite a while on these, so. Cheryl, why is the yarn wrapped that way? Do you mean on the cop? Okay, so the reason why it's wrapped the way it is on the cop is to make that center pull ball. That gives it the way that will make it so it easily comes out when you pull it from the center. So all that wrapping that specific way is all for that center pull ball that you want to get. Thank you, Lindsay. You make me blush. So anybody have any questions, please feel free, unmute yourself, ask questions. You want to see something again, I'm more than happy to show you. If you want to see starting it directly from the fiber versus a leader, I can show you that. It's a little bit more futzy, but I can definitely show it to you if you guys want to learn that. So please feel free to unmute yourself.